All right, so this episode, we are stepping out of our comfort zone and asking our guests to also step out of their comfort zone because they're not from the automotive vertical, and we're going to ask them a lot of questions about auto dealers. Auto dealers are spending millions of dollars every month on paid advertising, whether it's Google, Meta, third-party leads, retargeting, all of it. And yet, most of that spend is still judged by one number: cost per lead. Lower is better, higher is bad. That's the game. But here's the problem. In almost every other industry, that way of thinking about paid media is outdated. Not slightly off, it's fundamentally broken. We're going to take a look at how this industry spends money through the lens of someone who does this across multiple industries at a very high level. Emma Davis is the CEO of Working Planet and the host of the Data Planet podcast, where she talks to growth leaders across SaaS, travel, higher ed, industries that live and die by performance and accountability. Accountability is the big word in that sentence. She is not coming from automotive, and that's exactly why this conversation matters. Emma, welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Dave.
So we're going to let Emma define what good actually looks like at Working Planet, and then we're going to compare that to how automotive operates, and we'll see where things line up and where they don't. And to help us do that, we have Zach Billings, who is in this every day. So we're not just talking theory, we're talking practice here as well, and how actually this works on the ground. Zach, welcome.
Howdy. Thanks for having me.
Emma, if we strip away all the industry differences, because I know, like, you don't know how automotive works, what, in your opinion, does good paid media actually look like today? We're in April 2026.
So it starts with the business and financial goals for the business, works its way backwards from there. So what I mean by that is it's easier to talk about in terms of, like, what does it look like when it's bad? I have had clients who have growth goals or CAC targets that if we hit that growth goal at that CAC target, they're not profitable because they never did out the math of, like, wait, where are we as a business and what do we actually need to achieve? So good paid digital marketing treats the investment in marketing as an investment in growth, not some sort of necessary evil. Like, I'm supposed to be doing this. I don't really know what it's for. It's no, start with what is it that you're trying to achieve, and now let's work our way backwards from there. Mm-hmm. It has, from that financial basis, then a model of, okay, what does that mean at different stages of the funnel? Not because every lead or every customer will be the same, but because you want to have benchmarks along the way. So the areas that my company specialize in have interesting, funky things about them. So long sales cycles, multiple signals along the way before you actually see somebody turn into value. Ineffective marketing in those areas says, your average latency from lead to close is 3 months. So we're going to run this campaign for 3 months without making any changes and then look at what happens. That's ineffective because you have interim signals along the way you can be using to make changes to continue to improve and optimize things. Even if at the end of that 3 months, you made your first dollar in revenue from day one of that 3-month period, you shouldn't just be sitting on your hands that whole time. On the flip side, you also don't want to be making changes arbitrarily because you're afraid. Like, you need to have, again, going back to the goals, what does this look like at different stages of the funnel? What should we be seeing to know if this is working? All the way, okay, traffic. Are we getting enough traffic to, at our average conversion rate, be getting the volume of conversions we want? Great. Are we getting enough conversions to, at our average close rate, be getting the number of deals we want? Okay, great. And sort of work your way backwards from there. If you're making changes too frequently and not anchored to that model, you're going to run into a whole other host of issues of, like, well, now I don't know which end is up. Like, now I don't know something's working, was it that thing from 2 weeks ago or the thing from 3 weeks ago or the thing from last month? And so you need to have this clarity and confidence with the humility of knowing things in marketing are never 100% knowable. There's always some mystery to it. And so it's more like really effective, smart gambling than it is, one in, one out science in some ways. Like we're counting cards at blackjack tables. We're not, I don't have another. I didn't have.
We're out of metaphors.
We're out of metaphors. We're not doing something that is a guaranteed. I put $1 and I get $2 out. It's always placing bets, and you just want to have more and more informed bets so that you can turn it into a system that generates growth for you.
Sure. So if you put me at the blackjack table, and I know, okay, I'm looking for 21, and that's as far as my knowledge goes, but I'm still going to put myself out there as a blackjack player versus a player who knows how to count cards is going to be playing the same game, and they're going to describe themselves as also a blackjack player, but they're significantly more effective.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that first blackjack player who isn't counting cards is going to beat the card counter sometimes. Like it just, there is some luck to it. There is some, whoa, the wind, blew in my sales favor. I'm going to try and like chill with the metaphors a little bit because it's getting out of hand. But it's more about, again, the system, expecting you're going to have some losses, but having the framework and a consistent strategy is how you win over time.
Gotcha. So, Zach, how does that compare with how Automotive actually operates? Give us the juxtaposition here.
Sure. So in so many ways, it's very similar. There's perhaps less last click attribution clarity in Automotive because of the way that our lead passing is structured. So you have to make some more assumptions than at least I understand is, potentially the case in other industries. And I think I might have some follow-up questions for you, Emma. So in Automotive, first of all, for everyone listening on the Automotive side, CAC target is not a term typically thrown around. So customer acquisition cost in Automotive, we would typically look at that as just cost per sale, right? So we're very frequently targeting a cost per sale that is lower. Although there are some models by which you would say below a certain point, you're actually missing opportunity because you're not reaching far enough into your market, into your potential addressable market. And so I would say I heard a lot of similarities there in that a properly structured setup should begin with what's the goal? The goal is more profitability. Let's assume it's automotive sales. We're going to be saying, all right, we need to sell 10 more cars per month is the objective. And those cars need to be, X, average profit, gross profit per car. Those are definable business objectives from a financial standpoint. And then you can work your way backwards, as Emma was talking about, to what would a target CAC, customer acquisition cost or cost per sale be? Now, the piece that breaks this in Automotive is that when a lead is submitted on presumably the website, the lead in the CRM for the dealership never has the traffic source appended to that in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. Yeah.
We're
your face
we're
says
getting
everything,
visceral experiences here.
So what are you doing?
Yeah, right. So in Automotive, we have this thing called ADF formatting, auto lead data format. And this was invented in 1999/2000 as just a common way to say, these are what the fields are that would map from a lead input location, so a form on a website perhaps, to all of the CRMs to get everyone on the same page so that, any website platform. And here's another thing, Emma, in Automotive, there are just sort of like a cohort of 5 major and maybe 5 minor website vendors. and no one really has truly custom websites. So there's just sort of this like collection of website vendors and chat tools and bolt-ons that you can choose from. So back in the day, it was a different group of players, but bottom line is there was some need to have standardization across the fields that you would use to get information into the CRM. And back then, digital marketing obviously wasn't at the state of maturity by a long shot that it is today. So in 1999, most people weren't even convinced that like digital marketing in the form of SEO or SEM or anything like that, you know, those were not concepts that anyone talked about. It was just, if somebody comes to my website, how do I get that information into my CRM? And it was as simple as you make sure these fields are mapped in XML format in an email that goes to an email address, and that email address then, you know, is effectively porting that information into the CRM, and it knows how to map it. That has not been modernized since 1999.
Whoa.
So the result of that is that you have nothing in automotive that would append a referral source, like traffic for organic versus paid versus social. You definitely cannot do like campaign from the UTM or anything like that. And at best, it can be mapped into like a comments field that just then never sees the light of day after it makes it into the CRM. So in automotive, yes, all of those things happen, and that we're thinking about what are the financial goals for the client. What are we, you know, how are we going to back our way into a cost per acquisition? But the acquisition is where it breaks, because you have to make some assumptions in terms of, I know what our cost per lead is going to need to be to get to an average cost per sale of this, but I have to do that with assumed math based on what is that dealership's average close rate getting from lead to sale. And that's a big break, because that close rate is going to vary dramatically from maybe paid search and organic search, higher quality, more targeted leads, to social, where you grabbed somebody who was doom scrolling and got them to submit a lead, right? So you have to make these very nebulous assumptions. And so it becomes like this game of, you know, you have to be like an aura with the data and like look into my crystal ball and see where you connect those dots to be able to come up with an actual cost per acquisition.
And in the automotive world, are you arriving at a single cost per sale target, or do you have, you know, this Lexus, I'm willing to pay significantly more for that sale than this Corolla? I also know a lot about cars, so watch out.
No, it was a good example. It was. I would say some conversations, when led by somebody who understands this language reasonably well, when, you know, someone is leading that conversation, yes, there can be different targets for different inventory. Typically in automotive, it would end up looking more like this piece of inventory, let's say this Corolla, has been sitting on my lot for a long time, and that aging of the inventory is burning a hole in the dealer's pocket, and it becomes worth it to get it moved. And in any industry that has inventory, that is true. You're willing to pay a larger cost to be able to move aging inventory, up to and including not making any money on it just to get it out of the system. And so there can be times when perhaps maybe you would do a shopping ad, right? And you would target only aged inventory, and you'd have a higher accepted cost per acquisition, or in this case, it would be a lead cost for that inventory, because you know it's worth it to just get it off the lot. I would say most, right, juxtaposing bad versus what it really should look like, most conversations in automotive are not getting down to let's have different targets. It's just the dealership has, we'd ideally like to be at this cost per lead, cost per sale.
Got it.
Yep. So my question back to you on this note is,
I'm sorry. I'm just watching Emma just like quietly take this information in and say,
That's a bummer.
That's a bummer. I had somebody I had a client who was new to automotive, who had been in sort of industry around automotive, power sports, things like that don't have the same kind of set of standards that exist here, and then came into automotive and was just like, what do you mean you can't tell me which leads came from paid search, at least in a last click sense? And I was like, it doesn't exist. That technology is not available, even if it should be, even if it could be. It's not available in our industry. So your face said it all, but I mean, I would assume that in all other industries, at a minimum, you've got last click to be able to say that lead came from this campaign. Is that right?
Yes and no. So at a minimum, you probably have last click. Ideally, you don't just have last click, you have first click and maybe clicks in between, and you can sort of break things down by which touch do we think is having the greatest impact on ultimately getting the person over to conversion. You're also looking at incremental lift. So for channels, if you break them down into demand capture versus demand generation. So demand capture is something like paid search, where someone is saying, I want a car, and like, I got you, come here, like, come on over. You're just capturing demand that already exists. Demand generation is I'm doom scrolling and like someone introduced this idea into my head of like, ooh, maybe I do want this new car. Now that I am demanding, now there's demand from me for that thing. Often the demand generation is much harder to track via a click, just because of the channels where people interact with that media, and the nature of their user behavior. There's a lot of cross-device activity, also just a lot of awareness that ads are a thing. I don't want to click on something that's telling me to click on it. I'm going to go to that website by myself. So you might see, if you launch a Meta campaign or a connected TV campaign or something, a sudden increase in traffic from brand or direct traffic to your website, assuming you're capturing any referring information on your website. And so you're looking at sort of this combination of what did I track directly? What is the network telling me it generated, which is always an overstatement of what it actually generated, but is a useful data. And then what is the overall incremental lift that I'm seeing? And then you kind of piece those together to try and figure out what's the, if not the exact reality, what's sort of the realm that reality is falling into, so that, again, I can place better and better bets on my future hands.
The demand gen side in automotive, we would commonly just end up referring to it as branding, or sometimes it's thought of in terms of traditional marketing, traditional being like radio, TV, terrestrial TV. Now, more connected TV and, things like demand gen oriented Facebook ads. There is a pretty high degree of acceptance in automotive that those don't have clean attribution. And I try and help our clients frequently with, we'll look at something like Google Ads Keyword Planner and we'll see how did search volume on their brand change over time, and did it seem to happen sympathetically with a significant change in campaign spend for demand gen around their brand name. Now, in automotive, it's also very, you don't, if you're a Lexus dealer, for instance, you don't go out and try and drum up interest for Lexus, the brand, or a particular Lexus model, because, one dealership with their, spend somewhere in the realm of like all in monthly marketing spend, somewhere between 100 and maybe 300 grand a month. You don't have the resources to reach the consumer to get them interested in buying a Lexus to begin with. So in automotive, outside of advertising the individual business, the individual dealership, demand gen almost has no place, because you can't meaningfully impact that at the budget levels we're talking about.
Okay. I would, I don't know,
Pushback.
yeah, like, to me, and maybe it's, just thinking about the realms that I operate in with my clients, thinking about $100,000 to $300,000 budget versus the average value of a customer, you have like a decent N you could be working with there in terms of customer acquisition, steps earlier in the funnel that you could be tracking, that you could be optimizing to see, to have an understanding of like, what am I driving for demand there. I will say the interesting thing about dealerships compared to, or the automotive industry compared to where I typically function, which is more in like the nationwide or global digital realm, is obviously you have this like, the inventory's here, like it,
Yep.
it's in one specific location. And so it's a little harder to do things like geographic split tests of, well, we'll show, half the population this, and then we'll put the other half of the population in a control group and see how that activity differs. I don't know. Can you break that down by like zip code in within a specific radius of the dealership? There may be some crafty things you can do. And I think the way that I'm wired and sort of the people at my company are wired is this, like every day is that scene in Apollo 13 where they're trying to figure out how they can filter the carbon dioxide to get oxygen levels back where it needs to be using like duct tape and so when you say there's just no way to do that, I'm immediately like, I don't believe you. I bet there is, but I don't, I also recognize I don't know enough about the automotive industry to have an answer. The fact that you can't reliably capture the first party source information and referring information on those interactions and follow that down funnel to a purchase, I remain like, there has to be a way. Or like, who do I tell that I know in software development that like there is a huge market opportunity for you here? If you can crack this, you have the entire, automotive industry wanting to do marketing better at your fingertips. I'm still reeling. I still
Yeah,
I may never recover.
The politics and the push pull of motivations for not advancing that is a complicated and nuanced thing in automotive, based in sort of, I don't know, very dated companies with very dated technology not looking to expose their weaknesses, I think is some of the crux of that. And, it's a lot of companies that really don't have a great incentive to do it. It sounds like, one would assume that it behooves everybody to have better transparency so everyone can make better decisions. And wouldn't the technology vendor that has that ability to pass that information, like, wouldn't they get more customers by offering that as a feature? And therefore they would have every reason to do it. Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, what if their widget doesn't actually work as advertised? So I think there's a number of cases where there's risk introduced in doing that. But also you run into, I think, lack of customer awareness, customer being the dealer in this case, what they would get out of that additional information to be a voice in that system. And so let's just say that XYZ chat vendor says, hey, we could add this additional functionality. It'd be very simple to do, to just pass more parameters based on, the campaign of the traffic when the lead was submitted. All very possible. And what you end up on the other end is one of a few CRMs that are not the CRMs used. Nobody's got Salesforce, nobody's got HubSpot in automotive. There are a handful of automotive specific CRMs that also then have to modernize their end of the picture. And there has even been an effort at one point in time, one of the sort of leading voices in automotive on the marketing and vendor side of the ecosystem tried to band together a lot of companies to say, hey, let's do the second iteration of this for the new millennium, God forbid. And that was met with just a lack of cooperation. So there was absolutely an attempt to do it, but it hasn't made it through. And it is shocking, right? Because you just end up with that lack of transparency. But I agree with you completely that there's always some more information that can be gleaned by looking closer at the data, even if you've got these sort of hard-coded limitations, literally and figuratively. And the way that we look at things is trying to not just assume you can't get enough information to make informed decisions, and look, just like it sounds like you would, closer and just say, okay, well, the limitations are the limitations. We don't have all of the information, but there's always more that we can try to piece together to find what signals will allow us to better optimize what's in front of us. And just because something is geo-bound doesn't mean that you can't A/B test for geo. It just means that, unlike in a in a national sense where you do it, this metro versus this metro or this state versus this state, I'm assuming. You could do it, this half of your target geo gets it one way and this half gets another, and then you flip them and you see if you get an inverse result. There's absolutely testing that can be done. It just doesn't end up with, I know that Mr. Jones bought the Silverado last Tuesday because of this campaign.
Yeah. Well, one question that I have now is kind of digging into my perception of the auto industry, which is that it is incredibly sales driven. Every conversation I've ever had with a salesperson at a dealership, I am being sold to so hard right now. They are definitely trying to get their bonus. They're trying to hit their quota for the end of the month, like whatever it is, you can feel that. And so in thinking about, like, is there an auto dealership that isn't, centered around the sales staff? And anytime sales and marketing interact, especially around matters of attribution, things can get a little bit hairy. So I've encountered issues even in the digital space around like salespeople treating leads differently depending on what source they come from, or overwriting a lead source if they're like, no, I want credit for this because they interacted with that thing, but I had this conversation with it. And it's like, that's not what it's about. But I wonder if there's something about the automotive industry that makes them also, that adds to that political tech situation.
Yeah, there's definitely, it's not there's not a culture of the scientific method or a scientific approach to things being the way that it's done. It's more, like a finger, stick it in the air, which way is the wind blowing. It's more seat of pants vibes, up to and including things like what you just said, where maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I was just talking to one of our dealers the other day, and one of the problems that they're facing from a process standpoint is when they get leads from this source, they're often marked as basically unwinnable sales, bad leads, before anyone ever really takes the time to work them to figure out, well, how good was it? How bad was it? What is our success rate on those leads so that it can be properly quantified and then valued? It's just assumed, nope, those are difficult because, that came from maybe the manufacturer and it was given to, 6 other dealerships. And so it's going to be too hard to work. A lot of assumptions for sure. And a lot of people are just used to, I'm going to work the lead that's right in front of me, wherever it came from, unless it's a source that I'm going to discount, and not go back to, let's then look at this scientifically to figure out how can we eke out a bit more of this and a bit more of this. And I would say tons of that data exists. Like, it's not like we have a black hole in terms of what happens on a website. We have Google Analytics, and we work very hard to make sure that we have good eventing on all of the various, engagement and conversion methodologies. It can be nuanced because of all of these different cooks in the kitchen from a technology standpoint, but it's very possible to do while you don't end up getting the CRM attribution that I would love us to have. You certainly can figure out, all right, which sources are regularly driving form submissions, phone calls, depending on dealer cooperation. And this goes to another one of your questions, different levels of cooperation and different levels of ownership priority given to things like having clarity in data, right? Some dealerships, few, but some, have different phone numbers for different departments and have bothered to shop for, technology vendors in our space that can do resulting on phone calls, where like, we know that this was the outcome as opposed to just knowing a call took place, which doesn't necessarily mean that there was an outcome. It comes down to culture, sort of ingrained culture in the industry, and the leaders, the owners and leaders of dealerships and dealer groups who think in your terms and in our terms where data matters and we want this clarity are definitely driving change, but the average is not there.
Yeah. I am forecasting. I'm making assumptions now. Based on my experience with my clients, I'm guessing you encounter issues where if something is succeeding, that's just what was coming our way anyways, or that's the result of whatever great thing happened. if performance lags, that's because marketing isn't working. And so one of the battles that we have fought over and over again with our clients is your biggest source of spam could also be your biggest source of revenue. So is your issue that we need to pause that, or we need to figure out how to stop the spam? Or do you need a better system for handling low quality leads, or maybe not even spam, just lower intent activity? Do you need a better nurture system to bring those back? Because yeah, maybe we're getting people way higher in the funnel. They're not ready to purchase. To you, that feels like this is a less qualified audience, but maybe that's also where your highest value customers are coming from, or maybe you just need to be more patient and it needs to take longer. So, you know, our experience, especially with very sales centric organizations, is if we make a significant change, we will hear about it. And it's almost never good news, because you usually, give it some time. Like, you need to give it a beat to optimize. We need to see what's going on, give good signals back into the ad network. But any change, unless it is unequivocally, wow, every single person I'm talking to is ready to buy and wants to buy, the oldest
that happens every day.
Like, unless that happens, the sales team will feel it, and it feeling different from what they're expecting is usually not welcome.
So our last guest on the podcast, Dan Moore, I think said this pretty succinctly. It's frequently you don't have a marketing problem, you have a people and process problem. And I think auto dealers certainly run into this a lot. So there's a lot of momentum for, like, we've been doing it this way for a long time, and thus the train keeps going down the tracks because there's nothing obviously hampering it from continuing to go down the tracks. And nobody's willing to jump on the tracks themselves. That should be said. But also there's a culture in automotive where everything happens in 30-day chunks. Because the thing that matters most is what was the number at the end of this month. And then in May, it'll be what happened in May. And then in June, it'll be what happened in June. And so you end up with behaviors and actions that are based on meeting those goals, and not necessarily, as you said earlier, looking at a longer time schedule in which, like, you'll still make changes, but you're looking at the data more over time to allow you to gather more information to then feed that information back into the system to refine and make smarter bets.
Yeah. What we do with every single one of our clients, and putting this out into the universe so that the automotive CRM genius of tomorrow can hear this and, create a new future for you guys and your clients. We look at everything on both an in-period and a cohort basis. So there are times where we're having a pretty low revenue month for a client, and the answer is don't touch anything. Because what we can see about what's being generated right now is you're going to have a really good month next month and the month after. What we're seeing right now, that's the side effects of what we were doing 2 months ago. We already corrected for that based on the mid-funnel signals, and you just need to wait it out. Or, if we're trying to optimize to a specific cash flow target. So return on ad spend, or ad spend as a percentage of revenue, is just the inverse of that. We run into issues of needing to clarify with our clients. This is about getting to a specific pace for cash flow, not about push and pull. So pause the ads, pause all the campaigns right at the end of the month so that we can sort of coast through on the revenue being generated earlier so that our cash flow looks really good for that month, and then accelerate back up at the beginning of next month so that you're always on this efficiency roller coaster. Any significant change, you're going to find yourself on an efficiency. I don't know about roller coaster if you're turning it on and off, but certainly turning things on and off, you're just going to be getting whiplash, whether it's, the campaigns can't figure out how to optimize because just as they were, starting to understand who your audience is and, what signals to care about. Oh, now you changed the game, or now you told me something different, or now I'm not doing that anymore. So yeah, the like 30-day window thing, a lot of the analysis we do for our clients is mapping out, okay, when do we expect to see these results? What does that curve look like of, when we can have the greatest impact on a specific time frame? And then tracking both of those simultaneously, because the actual in-month cash matters. Like that's what the business owner is operating off of. And we have clients where if they're having a rough cash month, we are going to hear about it. And, there's not much we can say to help them with their concerns until they actually see the numbers picking back up, even if we know they're going to, and we can see the signals telling us they're going to. But it's important for us to make sure that we are not doing damage, or that we're, making changes based on the best interests of their business over the long term.
Vanity changes. Yeah. Very, very often vanity changes, like client feels the urgency of a bad moment in time, demands change. And if you just say, okay, we'll turn off that campaign and turn on this one, you've just shot the client in the foot, and that's not in their best interest. How in your industries, what nebulous question, but what percentage of your clients would you say trust that kind of feedback, the hold your horses, it's coming, like trust the process? How much of that do you get?
So I would say 100% of my clients have trusted that at some point. I'll say the times when the in-moment performance is really rough, that drops to like 90%. Then, that can be really difficult for some people to push through. But I think most of our clients, 5-10 years ago, we were educating our clients on how that works, and like, just trust us, just give us a moment. I remember having a conversation with a client now 8 years ago where we were mapping out for them, look, here's when people land on your website and here's when they convert, and it's about a 2-week span. And so every time we're like, wow, we're hyper efficient, go ahead, push the campaigns. Oh no, now we're really inefficient. It's because we have these lagging indicators. And so just let us be inefficient for this 2-week period, and you'll see it's going to all sort of pick up. And now they're 5 times the size that they were at that point. And just, which is not just because of us, but that was certainly a contributing factor. But now I think it's much more understood within the industries we're working in of, we arrive in a new relationship with a client and we ask, what is your typical sales cycle? What is the latency from first touch to first interaction? And they usually have some sense or some answer. And then as we're starting new tests and things, they tend to have patience, which may also be our own selectivity with our clients of like, we need to know from the beginning that you have some understanding of this, because what we do is hard, and we're not going to put all this time and effort into doing something that's just going to crumble in 2 months because you don't understand how your business works. And so, yeah, the people we work with generally, that's just a given. Like, so obviously we're going to be waiting 2 months to actually see what closes. Yeah, obviously, of course. And that's just like how we operate.
Have you ever run into a clients where they give you all those signals, but then 1 month in, they're saying, okay, so I know I said those things, but...
Yeah, I mean, and especially it depends on who we're talking to in the organization. So if we're doing marketing with the like owner founder, it's a little bit different from if we're working with, the director of demand gen for a company. Or, the digital marketing manager. The digital marketing manager usually understands what we're saying, but they're getting questions from someone else internally around why isn't this working? And so they're not asking for us to explain that. They're asking for help. Like, how do I explain this? How do I, help them not freak out? If it is the owner founder that we're working with directly, It is about bringing them back to like, look, let me show you your customers, let me show you your data, and show you like, here's where we're headed. And if we're not here by this point, this is when we revisit. Like, people just they don't want to hear just chill, just wait, we'll see. It's like, wait, how long? What are we waiting for? What are we going to see? And like, those are things that are still important to define, because otherwise, yeah, you could just be waiting forever and then realize like, oh, maybe it just wasn't working. So um like, you still have to be clear about that and still communicate that.
So I think a big takeaway that I'm getting here isn't that automotive is doing everything wrong or even a lot of things wrong, but it's that automotive is operating in an environment that is not built for what we want now. Like, it was built for what we wanted when Google still had a weird font, and when Yahoo was still a powerhouse in the search industry and meta keywords were a thing. And we don't have the systems and infrastructure evolution that has matched the pace of marketing technologies. And so we end up in this sort of, if I'm going to drop a big Scrabble word, a bifurcated world where you used cohort earlier, all right? I can drop bifurcated. In which, you know, the abilities of many marketing agencies are quite high, but then when the data gets down to the client, there's a big deviation between expectations and what they can see in the data, and then a larger deviation between what the human beings with that data do with it. So if you were to have a message to any dealer who's listening to this, or not even a dealer, just a person who's interested in data and marketing and doing things as best as they could, what would you say to them for like, here's a thing to try, here's an action to take that can help you move this forward, even incrementally?
I mean this in the least condescending way possible. But check out the scientific method. Like, start by digging through, well, what data do I have? Look at what your numbers look like. How long did it take to go from when this person first reached out to when they actually purchased this car? Or, what were the hangups of, people who reached out, wanted to buy a car, but couldn't? Was it a financing issue? Was it like, just try and identify what are the major friction points in customer acquisition, and what are the main sort of data points along the way, and then come up with some hypotheses. It's probably because of this. What can I do to test that? What can I do to try and understand that better? If you're looking to expand into paid digital or do more testing in paid digital, a lot of times it's looking at, well, what data do I have so far? And then having an expectation, it's going to be worse than that when I'm starting out in paid digital. So, how much worse? What can I sort of handle? What can I sustain as a business in terms of inefficiency while I'm figuring this out? Because there is a brighter tomorrow with that. But if you're sitting on a mountain of data, there's something there that could help you understand better your customers, what you should do next from a marketing or sales perspective. You don't need to start from scratch.
Agreed. And rather than offering a different piece of advice to dealers on this, I'll just add a layer, knowing our industry. So the scientific method, test, measure, build a hypothesis, iterate. These are important things. So the extra nuggets on that: first, you can't draw valid conclusions when you have dozens of variables at the same time, which means that when you're having a rough month, when you're in the 30-day cycle that we all find ourselves in automotive, and you're having a bad month, you can't go change a dozen different variables and change 9 things on your website and fire this vendor, add this vendor, change your chat tool, overhaul your campaigns. You will have no valid signals at all. So you have to limit your variables. And you have to remember garbage in, garbage out. There's a lot of reliance on trying to get AI-enabled CRMs or CDPs in automotive to kind of do all of the data parsing for us and figure out the trends and the common threads and figure out, what we can do differently. We need to actually take some time to think about these variables or engage trusted resources who can help us figure out these variables, isolate them, figure out what happened, understand it, and then iterate steadily. It's going to take time for everybody, and you can't just expect that this month I had a bad month, I'm going to change all the variables, and next month I'm going to have a great month. It doesn't work that way, and even if it does, you won't know which thing did it.
Ooh, can I add a bonus one? Inspired by
do it.
Zach? Calculate your own performance standard deviations, because sometimes it is just that was a random blip. And you can drive yourself nuts changing something that's like, my revenue was down 10% month over month. That feels devastating, but it's because I sold 2 fewer of those really high value vehicles. And if I look at how regularly I'm able to sell those, turns out that was just random chance last month. And so I probably shouldn't just drive myself nuts trying to chase down why didn't I sell 2 extra high value vehicles this month.
Not to keep on piling on, but dealers, for instance, the month of March has 10% more selling days than the month of February.
Yeah. What happens to their revenue in the month of March, Zach?
Yeah, it goes up by 10%. And
How?
it's for the dealers watching, like, just look at a period of time that you didn't change any variables, that you just same vendors, same spend, you left things alone for a little while because things felt okay, and look at your deviation. That's what Emma's getting at there.
All right. So wrapping it up, I think what's being said is what it comes down to is not more tools, not more spend. It's just better clarity on what is actually working. If I were to probably drastically oversimplify it, but it's a podcast. We got to let it go at some point. Emma, I really appreciate you coming on and giving us this outside perspective. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I am Emma Davis on LinkedIn, or go to workingplanet.com and check out what we're doing over there.
What about Data Planet, the podcast?
Excuse me. Yeah. Also go to Data Planet, the podcast. We have a LinkedIn page also where you listen to podcasts such as this one. You can next go over to Data Planet. Short and sweet 20-minute episodes. Just squeeze one in before you, while you're on your commute. If you had fun listening to this episode, boy, howdy. There's some good conversations over there you can listen to.
That was a very data nerd marketing way of saying all that. Zach, thank you so much for taking time out of your preparations for DMSC in Scottsdale. I know that you are busy because I saw your name in very large print on a LinkedIn advertisement for the speakers at the event. So you're a busy guy indeed. And for everybody who was listening, thank you so much for listening and partaking. Make sure you check us out on LinkedIn. Also, check out the Wikimotive blog. It's full of great content every month. And maybe, if you're feeling a little extra about it, subscribe to our monthly newsletter, which is full of articles written by employees across our entire office, not just the people who stand in front of cameras all the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Dave.
This has been In Search Of, a Real Conversations in Automotive podcast, hosted by Dave Estey and Zach Billings of Wikimotive. In Search Of is a Wicked Media production, with audio-visual engineering by Farrell McElravy, produced by Jason Cook.